When I picked up the phone to ask about my son's wedding, the woman on the other end answered with a tone so casual it felt like a slap. We tied the knot yesterday. We kept it small, just family and close friends. My hand went numb around the receiver. The plastic felt slick under my fingers, like something I was holding that belonged to someone else. I tasted metal in my mouth. I had paid rent for them for 3 years, wired money for a car, covered utilities and bills, and the word family was reduced to an invitation list that did not include me. In 20 seconds, 3 years of sacrifices turned into a sentence that made my throat close. I sat down at my kitchen table, and the chair creaked under my weight, as if it wanted to tell me I had been carrying more than anyone knew. I promised myself then that I would not be invisible anymore. 7 days later, when they came asking for help again, what I did next set off a sequence of events that led to a courtroom, a psychiatric evaluation, and a verdict that surprised more people than I expected. What would you do if your own child excluded you and called you unimportant? Stay with me, because this is how I turned a humiliation into the last thing they expected: accountability. I could still see the living room where Marcus and Lila had been sleeping when I first helped them move in. The couch smelled faintly of cigarette smoke and lemon cleaner. The apartment keys had hung from my old brass hook for 6 months, until one night I handed them over with a smile. I remember the crunch of gravel under my shoes as I carried boxes, my palms catching tiny splinters from the new coffee table I bought. I remember the whisper of the bank app on my phone when I sent the first transfer, the little bell notifying the successful transaction. I remember telling myself it was nothing, that family helps family, that this was love expressed in dollars. In truth, love had a price tag, and I paid it over and over. Rent, $1,200 a month for 36 months. Car payments, $8,400 over 2 years. Furniture and household items, $3,200. Emergency medical bills I covered after Marcus cut his hand, $1,150. Birthday parties, wedding deposits, last-minute bailouts when jobless weeks turned into months, $5,600. Total, more than $30,000 that left my account like drops from a faucet I had not noticed leaking until the floor was flooded. That night, I laid out the printed statements across my kitchen table like evidence, the paper rustling under my fingers. The kitchen light cast a halo on the numbers, every digit a small accusation. I ran my hand over the numbers, felt the tiny indentations of the printed ink. Memory came back as taste and texture. I could taste the burnt coffee from mornings I skipped. To send money, I could smell the faint scent of mothballs from the coat I refused to buy because I didn't want to cut back what they needed. I traced my finger along the columns of dates, 50, 100, 300 at a time. Automatic transfers every month, sometimes extra at the end of the month when a call came, urgent and sharp. "Ma, we really need this." The word really sat on my tongue like a stone. The next day I confronted Marcus. He opened the door with the sound of a chain sliding, and I felt the air on my skin, cool and heavy with perfume and the outdoor smoke of a neighbor's barbecue. He looked at me the way a man looks at a weather report he wants to ignore. We had a conversation that should have been short and full of remorse. Instead, it was long, circuitous, and filled with attempts to make me small. "Ma, it's not what you think," Marcus said, voice low. He chewed the inside of his cheek like a man trying to grind down an apology into something palatable. "Not what I think? You married someone and she found out by calling me back?" I said, fingers curled around the strap of my purse so hard I felt the leather crease. "Lila and I wanted it to be intimate. It was our day," he said. "You wanted it to be exclusive," I replied. "Do you have any idea how that sounded? After 3 years of me keeping a roof over your head, and you tell me I'm not on the list?" My voice shook. I could hear the clock in the hallway ticking like a metronome to my heartbeat. Marcus frowned. Ma, you don't understand. It wasn't about excluding you. It was about us starting fresh. You always come in with gifts and assistance, and we wanted to begin without that roadmap. Begin without what? The only roadmap you have came out of my pocket. I leaned into him because I was tired, not to threaten. He stepped back. Lila appeared behind him with a cup in her hand, the cup making a small clink. She smelled faintly of lavender and new lipstick. Lila, this is Marcus' mother, he said. He introduced us like a fact, like placement on a family tree that could be rearranged at will. Lila smiled at me with the kind of smile that tries on warmth and decides whether it fits. I'm so sorry if you were left out, she said. It was a small ceremony. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. Her words were soft as gauze. The tone was apologetic, but the eyes were practical, searching for the unspoken seams in the situation to mend. You didn't mean to, I repeated, tasting the phrase. You didn't mean to, but it happened. My chest felt tight. The conversation became a weave of excuses and justifications, with Marcus and Lila trading lines like, "We're not trying to hurt you," Marcus said. He stopped, as if the next words might fracture something between us. "You are," I said plainly. "You gave me a line and called it a family value." "That's not fair," Lila said, voice rising. "I honored privacy for us." "Privacy?" I asked, incredulous. "Privacy for who? For you and Marcus to pretend my contributions never existed? You have my number. You could have invited me. You could have told me. Instead, you used me until it was inconvenient." There were more exchanges, 8 to 10 back and forths, where each voice tried to claim a moral high ground. We circled the accusation. Each statement dipped in memory. Marcus insisted they loved me and respected me. I returned with dates and amounts and details. Lila defended their choice to keep the wedding small because of family drama and financial constraints, then quickly suggested they could have included me in a way that felt meaningful, perhaps a private brunch later. The sensory details were everywhere. The warmth of the sun through the apartment window, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the texture of the couch cushion under my knee as I sat down, because standing felt like waiting for a verdict. After they left, I sat at my kitchen table again and counted the total out loud. Numbers have a way of making feelings concrete. I said each figure like a line in a ledger. Rent, $43,200 over 3 years. Yes, I used a higher monthly when I included utilities and emergency repairs. Car payments, $9,000. Furniture and household items, $4,500. Medical and emergency, $2,400. Miscellaneous bailouts, $4,600. My voice grew steadier with each recitation. The final number landed like a stamp, $91,320. The room filled with the sound of my breath, and I felt both small and enormous at once. I realized then that this was not simply an emotional betrayal, it was financial extraction. It was abuse, financial in the pattern you only fully see when you add the columns. I reached out for help. I called Jerome, my neighbor of 17 years, who had seen Marcus grow from a lanky teenager to a man who could still lean on me without asking. Jerome's voice came through gritty, like gravel, and he listened as I read dates and amounts. "Ma, you gotta stop," he said plainly. "This is not love. You have records. You can show them." He offered concrete support. He would be a witness to my presence helping them move, to the visits where I paid for groceries. He came by that afternoon, sat with the statement spread out, and smelled faintly of motor oil and rain. He promised to help me document things. I named people one by one who would be part of the story. Jerome, neighbor and witness. Carla Mendez, the bank manager who knew my account and remembered the standing transfers. Elena Cho, the attorney. The key is to add kidney beans or black beans. That's a great source of protein, and they have a really good texture that works well in chili. Officer Ramirez, a kind woman from the local station who once helped me when my car window was smashed. Dr. Samir Singh, a psychiatrist who could speak to capacity and stress if needed. and Tasha, my longtime friend who would sit with me in court. Each person I named felt like a piece of armor. I had, finally, a network. That week, I went to the bank. The smell of coffee in the lobby mingled with the scent of polished oak. Carla greeted me by name and led me to a small office where sunlight came slantwise through the blinds. I explained I wanted to cancel automatic transfers and set up fraud alerts. She asked for my ID and I passed it across the desk. Her fingers, warm and quick, danced across the keyboard, each click a small act of reclamation. When you cancel a standing transfer, it prevents future automated debits, she said, steady and concrete. We will put a stop on the outgoing scheduled transactions and place a flag on your account to require verbal confirmation for any transaction over $500. It typically takes 24 to 48 hours to fully process, but we can issue immediate holds for suspicious or unauthorized withdrawals. Her explanation was the precise, procedural language that feels both cold and liberating. It was 285 characters worth of bureaucratic clarity, and it sat in my head like an instruction manual for taking back control. That afternoon, I changed the locks on the house. The locksmith's truck smelled of oil and metal. The old deadbolt came off with a metallic sound that felt cathartic. I had the new locks installed and the old keys collected into a small box, each one a relic of trust. I called Marcus to tell him. He called back, voice sharp, then pleading, then angry. "You don't have the right to do that," he said. "I have every right to protect my property," I replied. "It's my home. If you want a key, follow the steps with respect." Lila showed up at my door the next day, ring of small bells on her sandals, lipstick smudged slightly from a cup of coffee. She peered through the window, and I could see in the way she turned her face that she was trying to size up the situation. We had a conversation on the porch, 8 to 10 exchanges long, during which she alternated between apology and entitlement. "We thought you would understand," she said. "We had our reasons." "You used me," I said, "used my money and my space. You did not invite me to your wedding, and then you treated me like a stranger." She paused, fingers tracing the pattern of the railing. "I didn't know the depth of what you were doing," she confessed. "I thought Marcus handled these things." Her confession had the rawness of someone who had been in a hurry to arrange life and missed a seam. I smelled the lemon on her hands from washing dishes and the faint residue of baked goods. The more I pushed back, the more they doubled down. Marcus talked about privacy, about starting afresh, about boundaries that supposedly excluded me. Lila's face tightened when I mentioned money, as if the conversation was about a subject she had hoped to avoid entirely. Then came the escalation. A man in a gray suit with a folder and a practiced smile showed up at my door claiming to represent their interests. He introduced himself as Mr. Barrett, and his folder had an official weight to it. He asked whether I had any medical conditions to report and suggested, gently at first, then more firmly, that perhaps we should consider a professional evaluation of my capacity. "Sometimes," he said, "people act differently in different circumstances, and a neutral assessment helps everyone." He smiled the smile of someone who had rehearsed compassion. They filed papers within weeks. I woke to a hand-delivered notice that someone had petitioned the court for a guardianship inquiry. The paper smelled of printer toner and stamped ink. My heart pounded, single, then double beats, and bile rose at the back of my throat. The petition questioned my capacity to manage finances and alleged erratic behavior. I read the words as if they were physical blows. In the margin, the clerk had stamped the date. The accusation felt like an invasion of privacy. They had weaponized the systems I had trusted. I met Elena Cho in her small office with a plant on the sill and a framed law degree that had a scuff on the lower corner. Her voice was brisk when she accepted my case. "They are trying to use the guardianship process to control you," she said. "The legal standard for guardianship is high. The court is supposed to protect persons who cannot make their own decisions. You will need medical evaluation, documentation of the finances, and witnesses who can speak to your daily competency. We will contest this." Her instructions were concrete. The procedural explanation she gave of guardianship was measured and filled the room with the logistics of justice, the filing of a response, the request for a medical capacity assessment, the subpoenaing of bank records, and the depositions of neighbors. She told me what to expect: hearings, cross-examination, the possibility of temporary orders. Her explanation was about 320 characters worth of legal clarity and made the path ahead feel navigable. Then the psychological assessment arrived. A clinician came to my home, a woman named Dr. Lillian Park, who smelled faintly of mint and had a calm voice like warm water. She asked questions about memory, daily tasks, finances, and recent stressors. I answered, measured, conscious of each word. The testing room was small. I could hear the slow drip of the sink in the next room. I drew on decades of independence, the smell of my own bread baking, and the routine of paying bills every month. Dr. Park noted my clear recollection of figures and dates, my ability to discuss management of my estate, and a steady emotional response to stress. Her report would become crucial evidence that I was fully capable of managing my affairs. There were moments during this fight that felt like tectonic shifts. One afternoon, when a neighbor accidentally overheard a heated phone call and later testified, he described my actions in a way that made them sound premeditated. The trips to buy supplies for Marcus, the dinners I brought, the nights I sat up worried. A woman from church, Pastor Harris, offered to testify about my volunteer work and community presence. These testimonies were sensory. His memory of my voice comforting a child he saw me cradle, her recollection of my hand stacking hymnals in my kitchen, the metallic clink of the coffee pot after a meeting. The courtroom listened. Each moment of testimony was a line in a narrative that countered the petition against me. The court hearing was a theater of small details that mattered. I remember the echo in the hallway as I walked in, the polished wood benches reflecting the late afternoon light, the faint scent of paper and cleaning solution. I remember the judge's robe whispering when he shifted like a small storm. Marcus was there with Lila, her hand occasionally finding his in a gesture of solidarity that felt, to me, performative. Mr. Barrett sat beside them with his folder, and his smile had hardened into a professional expression. Elena sat across from me, and she had a stack of documents, each page crisp and ready. When testimony began, voices rose and fell. Jerome recounted my presence and support, the creak of the boxes I carried, the text messages asking for help, and the repetitive transfers. She helped because she loves, he said. She did what mothers do. Dr. Park explained the results of the capacity evaluation calmly. The bank manager, Carla, testified to the standing transfers and to the recent changes when I froze the account. Officer Ramirez described a prior incident where she had observed me handling my affairs independently and competently. The exchanges were detailed, with back-and-forth cross-examination that stretched to 8 to 10 exchanges each in the main testimonies. Opposing counsel questioned the timing of my account freezes and suggested I had acted inconsistently. Elena responded precisely, pointing to dates and repeated behavior. The sensory details of the courtroom, the rustle of paper, the light glancing off a nameplate, the dry coughs, anchored the narrative. At one point, Marcus stood to give his statement. He spoke in careful phrases about privacy and a desire to forge his own path. Lila testified with a tear that had the smell of mascara in the air when she dabbed at it. The attorneys traded questions, each moment of cross-examination revealing more about family than 1,000 private conversations ever could. My voice, when I spoke, sounded like someone who had practiced honesty and clarity until the words came steady. I gave because I loved, I said. I expected reciprocity and presence, not disappearance. The judge listened, eye steady, and in the end asked that both sides consider mediation. That felt like a pause, not an end. But mediation failed. Emotions are not ledger entries to be balanced easily. Marcus and Lila pushed for guardianship, arguing concern. I pushed back with my documentation. Elena filed oppositions, requested more evidence, and subpoenaed witness lists. Mr. Barrett attempted to introduce a statement suggesting occasional forgetfulness. Elena had Dr. Park cross-examine that narrative and demonstrate how stress and grief can be manipulated into perceived incapacity. The courtroom exchanges there were technical, precise, objections, responses, admissibility. The procedural details mattered: how to file oppositions, how to request a court-ordered capacity assessment, how to introduce bank records. Those procedural notes, in 300 characters of dense clarity, explained how a guardianship petition could be challenged through subpoenas, expert testimony, and documented financial histories. Eventually, the matter moved to trial. The trial was not a single explosion, but a series of calibrated detonations: evidence, witness statements, expert evaluation. Dr. Singh, the psychiatrist I called to testify for me, spoke plainly about stress, coercion, and financial exploitation patterns. He explained, in a calm, clinical voice, the markers of undue influence versus genuine incapacity. He said, "Capacity is task-specific. Someone may manage daily tasks, but be vulnerable to manipulation. The law protects both vulnerability and autonomy. The jury, where applicable in similar cases, would need to weigh that. In my state, the judge would decide." The trial had the texture of a long, slow storm. The judge, after reviewing testimony and evidence, weighed two main things: whether I lacked capacity to manage my affairs, and whether guardianship would be necessary for my protection. The scales tipped when Dr. Park and Dr. Singh both testified that I demonstrated coherent management, and when bank records showed my deliberate pattern of transfers and communications, not impulsive spending. The verdict was not theatrical. It was a sentence read in a small, sonorous voice. The judge ruled that there was insufficient evidence to place me under guardianship, and that the petition was denied. The words indeferido slid out, and suddenly the air in the courtroom felt lighter. I felt a flood of relief that tasted like sweet tea. Elena squeezed my hand. Jerome let out a long breath. Marcus's face flushed with emotion that was hard to read: anger, shame, sorrow. Lila's hand trembled. In the weeks that followed, I negotiated boundaries. I returned some help with conditions, created a written agreement for future transfers, and put in place safeguards so no one could unilaterally claim access to my funds. I donated a portion of money to an organization that helped elders protect their assets, because I wanted the money to matter beyond the wound. There were moments of tense negotiation where I had to rehearse lines I had never thought I would say. One late-night confrontation where Marcus accused me of trying to control his life became a battle of wills. We exchanged words until both of us were raw. "You are my son," I said, "but you cannot use me until I am spent. That is not love, that is extraction." He answered, "You make it sound like I owe you everything." "No," I said, softer, "you owe me honesty." Those moments were short but heavy, 500 to 600 characters worth of internal conflict each, where memory and decision collided, and I had to choose dignity over comfortable subservience. The aftermath involved practical steps. I transferred accounts to a more secure setup with two-factor authentication, set daily transfer limits, and designated Elena as a contact on my financial matters. I wrote a simple, clear document outlining any future assistance with specific terms, and I kept copies in a locked file. The bank placed a signed note on my account, requiring written consent for large disbursements. These procedural steps, each described in short technical language, gave me peace. The legal process had taught me how to translate love into boundaries without guilt. 1 month after the verdict, life shifted in small, practical ways. I had changed the locks, which made my evenings calmer. The new key had a cold, clean weight in my palm. I began to take walks again in the mornings, smelling the damp earth after rain, greeting the barista at the shop by name. Marcus had moved out of the apartment I had helped them secure and into a place he found with a roommate. Lila enrolled in a community college course in design, and she sent me a postcard one afternoon with a print of a sunflower. I felt a quiet satisfaction at these changes because they were beginnings of autonomy for all. Financially, I reorganized my accounts and set a modest savings goal for myself. I met with Pastor Harris and Tasha for coffee, and we planned a small trip. It was small, deliberate, and comforting. The 1-month mark tasted like warm bread and felt like a breath I could finally hold. 3 months later, the house had a renewed sense of order. I had sold one extra car I had been maintaining for their convenience and donated part of the proceeds to an elder advocacy group. I took a painting class that I had long postponed and started to travel light on Sundays, going to different parts of the city I had not explored. Marcus and I had one honest conversation where he apologized, not for everything, but for the exclusion, for the part where he let shame guide him. Lila sent me a photograph from her class, smiling with paint on her hands. She had grown, and so had I. We had awkward dinners that began to feel less like battlegrounds and more like negotiations. The money I had set aside gave me security. The boundaries I established gave me peace. At 3 months, the world looked like a map with new roads drawn in pencil, and the horizon felt reachable. 6 months on, I had crossed a threshold I did not expect. I had enrolled in a community program for older adults to learn digital skills and video editing. I started a small blog where I wrote about reclaiming agency and reading court transcripts, and people responded. I used some of the funds to take a trip with Tasha to visit a coastal town where the salt wind smelled clean and our laughter mingled with gull cries. Marcus had stabilized in his job and reached out with small, respectful updates. Lila came by to return a dish and stayed to chat about pottery. The court had declined guardianship, yes, but the real victory was in the restoration of my autonomy. I had traded an existence of quiet use for an arrangement of mutual respect. I donated a portion of the recovered money to legal clinics that advise elders on financial abuse, and I set up a small emergency fund that would be overseen by independent trustees if I ever needed it. The 6-month mark felt like a replanting. I was not the same tree, but I had the same roots, and now the space to grow. If you have been pushed into giving until there is nothing left to give, know this. You can document, gather witnesses, and find legal tools to defend your autonomy. There are procedures. File a response to any guardianship petition within the statutory period. Request an independent medical capacity assessment. Subpoena bank records to establish the pattern of transfers, and use expert witnesses to explain stress and manipulation versus true incapacity. Count every transfer, save every text and email, and name witnesses who observed the pattern of giving. The law is heavy with procedures, but those procedures exist to protect people like you. And if you are in that situation, reach out to local elder protection services, a reputable attorney, and witnesses who know your life. I want to ask you something because this is the moment where I bring you into the room with me. If you discovered you had given tens of thousands and been excluded from the most intimate moments of your child's life, how would you react? If you would do something similar, write in the comments starting with "I would" and complete the sentence in one line. Your words could help someone who is reading and feels alone. We are a community in the way we speak and in the way we offer concrete steps and moral support. Share a strategy, a resource, a phrase that helped you take the first step. Your comment could be the turning point for someone who needs to know they are not without options. At the end of this journey, I keep a few things. The first is the knowledge that dignity matters more than enabling. The second is the influence of clear boundaries that allowed relationships to heal or be redefined on honest terms. The outcome was a denial of the guardianship petition, a partial return of control, and a set of practical agreements that prevent this pattern from repeating. I also learned to translate love into documentation, agreements that stipulate the conditions of financial help. I do not say this to suggest love and money cannot mix. They can, but when money becomes a lever to control, it is exploitation, and exploitation must be named and opposed. I am not the same woman who handed over keys with a quick smile. My name is Mariah Collins. I still cook Sunday dinners. I still laugh too loud on phone calls. But I also have a file that lists transfers, witnesses, and a clear set of rules for future support. I travel sometimes with my friend Tasha, and sometimes alone. I donated some of the money to causes that protect elders and used another portion to take classes I had put off for decades. My greatest takeaway is simple. Autonomy is not selfish. It is necessary. If this story moved you, tell me in the comments which part hit you the hardest. If you want more practical legal breakdowns about guardianship, bank protections, or how to gather evidence, subscribe and I will bring experts to explain step by step. Protecting yourself is an act of love for yourself and for those around you. Remember, the person you need to guard first is you.